Good morning. Our opening words today are from Dr. Gabar Mate, who is a renowned addiction expert and who wrote the book In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, Close Encounters with Addiction. And these are his words. Not every story has a happy ending, but the discoveries of science, the teachings of the heart, and the revelations of the soul all assure us that no human being is ever beyond redemption. The possibility of renewal exists so long as life exists. And how to support that possibility in others and in ourselves is the ultimate question.
Good morning. So here's what addiction sounds like in my head. I'm feeling uncomfortable or bored or upset or angry. And I just I need a fix. I need to get that thing. When will I have a moment to go get it? Oh my gosh. Do I have enough money with me? Can I run and get it from the store in between things? But the last time I had it, I felt so bad and I was filled with shame. But while I was having it, it was so good and took away all that pain. Okay, I'll just go get it. I'll go get it really quick and nobody will know. I'll just sneak it in. And tomorrow, I'll make it up tomorrow. I won't have any tomorrow. Okay, now I need to just concentrate on my work, what I'm supposed to be doing. But I can't stop thinking about that thing. Why do I keep going through this cycle? What is wrong with me? I want to talk to you about my journey with addiction this morning. I have a wicked addiction to sugar. I have been free of sugar for 1,563 days now. After a lifetime love affair with sugar, I had gotten to the place where the mind chatter, like you heard just now, was constant. I finally decided to do something to stop my repetitive behavior and thoughts around sugar. The thing that ended up working for me was to stop eating it completely, sugar and sugar substitutes. The quality of my addiction is such that if I just have a little or eat it in moderation, it's nearly impossible to stop that runaway train of compulsion, even if I just have a little tiny bit. So with several layers of human support and with several new habit stacks, I have been successful so far at slaying the sugar dragon in my life for 4.5 years. And in the process, I released 65 pounds, which is a nice little bonus. This morning, I'll be sharing stories about myself and also about our 17-year-old son, Joey, who, by the way, has given me explicit permission and his blessing to share his addiction story as well. We are joined by 4 other folks from OCUC who will be sharing their addiction stories, bringing addiction out from behind the shadows and into the light of day. None of us are experts on this subject, and we're not claiming to have all the answers, but we are drawing on our own direct experiences to share our stories. My definition of addiction is that it's a malfunctioning coping mechanism which compels someone to repeatedly use substances or engage in behaviors, even though they have harmful consequences. And Joey's definition is that it's a fight between your conscious and unconscious mind, trying to justify if an action is right or wrong. I'm so grateful that I've had the experience with my own addiction to sugar, because it made me much more understanding and compassionate when we found out that Joey had an addiction to drugs. What I've come to understand for myself is that addiction is addiction, no matter which substance you use, sugar, drugs, gambling, shopping, or a million other things. Our culture tends to vilify some substances over others. Heck, my addiction to sugar is actually encouraged in our culture, and it's particularly marketed to children. If you're 50 or over, you probably remember this commercial. Anyone remember that? Gnawing on gnawing on raw sugar cane. And then there's the Girl Scouts selling cookies with this inspirational message: eat, share, care. And whenever we walk through the mall, we are bombarded by the scent of Cinnabon. We have a shout out for the Girl Scout cookies. In addition to an addiction to sugar, I've had a long-running addiction to working and being busy, another addiction that has a stamp of approval from our society. But my overworking has been detrimental to my mental health, my relationships, and my ability to connect to the whole of me. I can always tell I'm pulled by addiction when I want just one more. When I feel that tug, I know the hope of a dopamine hit in my brain is drawing me into the snare of addiction. I recently put boundaries around my work life, and I'm doing much better balancing my work time. But in its place, I now have a paint by number addiction. Not this kind of paint by number, but this kind. This is a painting, a custom painting I did recently of our dog. Paint by number is a real thing now, just so you know. When a person has an addiction issue, it's quite likely that they use more than one addictive substance or behavior. Sometimes one addiction is just traded for another. You can see evidence of that outside any 12-step meeting in a cloud of smoke outside their doors. Everyone's smoking cigarettes. Here are some other things besides sugar, work, and paint by number that I've been addicted to at various times in my life. Crossword puzzles, Duolingo language lessons, Facebook scrolling, audio and video editing, chart and list making, words with friends, knitting, spider solitaire, jigsaw puzzles, and checking my phone for messages constantly. Notice all of my addictions are solitary, indoor, inwardly focused, and take lots of concentration. They keep me disconnected from other people and disconnected from my own painful emotions. None of these activities are bad on their face, but when an addiction is involved, it's easy for even a positive behavior to throw a person off balance. And even though some addictions are not nearly as deadly as heroin or alcohol, they can still create serious unwanted consequences in life. And now I'm so grateful that Amelia Russo-Newstad wanted to share her addiction story, which has some similarities to mine.
I'm really grateful that Beth decided to focus this service on addiction, because it's something we all can relate to, whether we consciously have experienced it ourselves or loved ones have. It's a really important state of mind. Over the years, gradually, I developed an addiction to work and to planning, especially to the mind always being active with those things and not really being able to slow down. And it actually helped me recently to recognize that as an addiction. I didn't really see it as a judgmental term as much as it sort of made it common, I guess, for lack of a better word, and more addressable, just being able to identify it and be conscious of it. Because I think the most difficult thing of associated with an addiction is not being aware, because any kind of addictive behavior sort of creeps in, and before you even know it, it's obviously really reinforcing in some way or another. It can be difficult to change because we all value work in our society. We all say, the harder working you are, the better, and and you're so productive and awesome, but it does keep one away from life, and it has an adverse effect. It's had an adverse effect on my health, to not be able to have mental rest and not be able to play and physically, mentally rest sometimes when it is needed. So I'm very glad to be on a healing path, and I think the main things that have helped me are conscious awareness and consistent, kind support, and most of that coming from me. And obviously, it's a wonderful thing if it comes from others as well. But practicing doing other than the addictive behavior, and staying with it and being consistent and being really kind and non-judgmental, that really helps.
Thank you so much, Amelia, for sharing your story. That was really powerful. When John D. Rockefeller was asked how much money is enough money, his answer was just a little bit more. I think you can be addicted to making money. Can you think of anything you've ever been addicted to? Anything that calls out and says, just one more, just a little bit more? Why do addicted people choose the substances we choose? For me, I can tell you why sugar called my name. I was born to teenage parents who already had a 2-year-old. And because my parents became pregnant before marriage, their parents made them get married and move into their own place. You made your bed, now you lie in it. Remnants of our country's puritanical roots. So my siblings and I basically had children raising us. My father immediately became a workaholic to take care of us. He was loyal and felt a great sense of responsibility, which I have to hand it to him is really awesome. But I never saw him, literally. He worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for most of my childhood. So my mom was home with my older sister and I, and later my brother. She was probably lonely and scared and filled with shame and with no hope for a future of her own. My sister and I became very good girls, probably because we sensed our mother's distress and didn't want to add to her problems. And at a very young age, I became drawn to sugar. This is a photograph of me at age 1. My leg was in a cast from a corrective surgery I had on my foot, and I was sitting on the kitchen floor. I had pulled out the sugar canister, and I was feeding myself handfuls of sugar so wildly that I had to get my cast replaced because sugar had gotten into the cast. The fact that I could get so deeply into a canister of sugar before anyone found me is indicative of the lack of supervision I had as a child. I therefore became very self-sufficient and kept myself busy, the roots of my workaholism. My mother was probably depressed and often had backaches and weaknesses, possibly due to her inability to process her own emotions. So my rudimentary 1-year-old lizard brain found a solution. Instead of getting sweet assurances from my mother, I was able to reliably get that sweet hit with sugar. As I went through my childhood, I would regularly binge on powdered sugar, marshmallow cream, Jell-O powder, right out of the box, the powder still, not made Jell-O, the powder, and any other sweets that we would have in the house. Now, when I think back to those early years, I am able to have self-compassion and understanding about why I am so drawn to sugar still today. That awareness doesn't cure the addiction, but it helps chip away at its power over me. And now Cindy Ballantyne will share her addiction story.
I'm in recovery from a phone game addiction. About a month ago, I decided it was serious enough to stop. Although, as soon as I quit, I put the pedal to the metal in my exercise addiction, and I am currently walking over 10 miles a day. I like to get 22 to 25,000 steps a day. And I'm addicted to my Fitbit, setting and achieving goals with it. One of the most insidious is a very simple goal, getting 250 steps an hour, which obviously I get quite a bit more than that most hours. But I have my Fitbit set to get them from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 14 hours a day. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of creativity to fit that into a normal life. Like I'm running around the house in circles, getting all my steps in before the hour's up, or having to turn off the video of a Zoom meeting and run in place for 3 minutes. I have another addiction that's less socially acceptable than exercise. I have a lifelong habit of picking at my skin, especially scabs, but I will pick at healthy skin and create them. I feel helpless to leave a scab alone. Sometimes I notice, as I feel compelled to pick at my skin, I notice that there's something I don't want to feel, or I'm afraid of something. But to be able to stop and be present is sometimes not possible. I consider all addictions to be coping mechanisms, from horrific trauma to the everyday trauma of living in our weird consumer culture. The difficulty in making meaningful relationships with our friends, strangers, and our environment. From not being seen and not seeing the beauty and miraculousness around us. We're estranged from ourselves and our world. And the pain of that, even if we're only dimly aware, can be unbearable.
Thank you, Cindy, for sharing your courageous vulnerability with us. When I am going through really tough times, I use my music, of course. That's my go-to. And this song has been sung by me like a jillion times in the last few years. I find this chorus so simple and easy to just grab whenever I need it. Sing or sway with me. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing again. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. Here we stand, breathless and pressed in hard times, hearts hidden like laundry on backyard clotheslines. Impossible just takes a little more time. From the muddy ground comes a green volunteer. In a place we thought barren, new life appears. Morning will come whistling some comforting tune for you. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. One more time. You can do this hard thing. You can do this hard thing. It's not easy, I know, but I believe that it's so. You can do this hard thing. Okay, we're going to shift gears a little bit now and think specifically about people who are addicted to drugs. Most drugs are illegal in the US, and all of them are illegal for teenagers to use. So the substances our son uses not only hook him, but they pull him into an underground marketplace and encourage illicit behavior just to obtain the substances. Drug addicts are vilified, criminalized, incarcerated, tossed aside, and abandoned. I was scrolling through my Facebook feed compulsively, as I do, one day and ran across this photograph of a sign that reads, "Why is Narcan free to a dope addict, but my insulin is $750 a month?" And if you don't know already, Narcan is a nasal spray that reverses opioid overdoses. It literally brings people back from the dead who have OD'd. and it can be obtained and administered pretty easily by friends or family members. When I kept scrolling, I saw the rest of the meme with half of the billboard blacked out. So now it reads simply, why is my insulin $750 a month? And there's a comment at the bottom that says, other struggling people are not the enemy. Our country certainly needs to figure out a better system of healthcare, that's for sure. Dr. Gabor Mate addresses the villainization of people addicted to drugs so eloquently. We see that substance drug addictions are only one specific form of blind attachment to harmful ways of being. Yet we condemn the addict's stubborn refusal to give up something deleterious in her life to the life of others. Why do we despise, ostracize, and punish the drug addict when, as a social collective, we share the same blindness and engage in the same rationalizations? Now I'd like to bring up Anna Gis, who will share her story of addiction with us.
Can you hear me? So my name is Anna, and I am a recovering heroin addict. My sobriety date is 12/1/2019, and for that, I give God all the credit. So just so you know, that's 18 months, and that is a miracle for me because I literally couldn't get 18 seconds. I'm daughter of Marilyn and Maurice Gis. They adopted me when I was 3 weeks old. So I've been in and out of rehab. I started heroin when I was 15, and I'm going to be 40 this month. Really nervous right now. As much as I like talking about me, this is still nerve-wracking. In and out of rehabs, in and out of prison. And I had 2 kids at a young age, 22 and then 24, I believe. And I couldn't even get sober for those 2 children. He's 17 now, and my daughter's 15. And I have a 2-year-old who I'm actually raising on my own for the first time being a mom. Heroin was my life. It was my love, my best friend. It was there for me whenever I needed it. My life was straight chaos. I lived on the streets for 6 years, in and out of prison, in and out of rehab. And every time I would go to rehab, I was grateful because I thought I was going to learn how to use heroin legally and be able to live life on life's terms and still shoot heroin. And it doesn't work like that. My mind, if I heard the word no, I was going to figure out a way to hear the word yes, and heroin was going to make life easy for me, but it never did. I have 39 felonies on one case. I did 7 prison terms, but I've only been to prison once. And so I just got off parole. I've been on probation since I was 17, and I finally just got off for the first time in my life. I went to treatment with my son because my mom sure wasn't going to take Bradley because she had Darren and Emma. And something in there clicked. I don't know what it was, but I got a sponsor. I did 12 steps, which I was adamant about doing because I had a problem with the God thing. I had to be able to see, touch, feel him. And when it was broken down to me that I have a God of my understanding, which is a good orderly direction, it clicked and I ran with it. I would literally call my sponsor to ask her if I could take a shower or if I could brush my teeth because she told me to call her for every decision I had to make because my decisions weren't good. So as I was in New Directions for Women and Children, I was there for 8 months. I did my step work. I took direction. I jumped out of the driver's seat of the car and into the passenger seat, and I let somebody else steer my life because the way I was living was not working. And now I do panels. I save other women. I work in treatment. I'm starting school to be an interventionist, and I have a great life today, which I never really thought I would be able to say that or be where I'm at. I have my own apartment, my car, I pay my own bills. I have my 17-year-old at my house right now, sleeping on my couch, which I never thought that would happen. Trying to build a relationship with my daughter, Emma, not happening. She's still not a big fan of mom, but it is what it is. Us addicts, we carry a lot of guilt, shame, and embarrassment, but I was taught to hold my head up high and just live with the stuff that I've done. You know, I am the mom that I was to those kids, but I can't have that mother guilt because that is what kept me in my addiction for so long. And so once I owned it and admitted it and talked about it, it got me through. And that's not who I am. That's who I was to survive in that addiction. I did a lot of stuff that I'm not proud of robbed my parents, lied to my parents, left my kids at my parents' house, wrote them letters from jail. I promise I'm going to change, just bail me out. It's always the same story. And finally they told me no. Found Al-Anon. I hated him for it. And now I respect my mom, love her. We have a good relationship. And I believe it saved our relationship and her life, let alone mine. So if you have anyone that's in addiction, struggling, like we are very loving, caring people. We know the sides of both worlds, the chaos and the good. You know, it is hard to have somebody that's in that life because we're hard people to love. And all it is my mom had to sit by that phone waiting for that phone call that I was going to die. And I called her one time when I got out of prison and I was in the hospital in Washington and I had endocarditis, which is a blood infection, and a lot of heroin addicts get it and they don't live. And they said I was 4 hours from death. I was in the hospital. This is how extensive heroin addicts are, like, or any addict. I was in the hospital with a PICC line and I was still shooting dope in my PICC line. And the doctor's like, you're going to die. They had to put cops out my door, take my phone away. I was screaming at them, yelling at them. They had to detox me in there and I got out. I have 65% of my heart that works. It'll never come back. I have hepatitis C, which I'm on meds for. I'm literally a blessed woman to be standing here talking about my story, because a heroin addict for 24 years, I should not be standing here. Like, I'm a walking miracle and I love my life today and I have great support, and that's all I got, really. So thanks.
Oh, Anna, we are so proud of you. And so I'm so grateful that you came to share your story. It's very important for us to hear. And some of us might have known Anna at different times in her life, and we're just so proud of you. Mm-hmm. And now I'd like to share part of our son Joey's story about his drug addiction. Joey's dad and I adopted him when he was 7 months old. He sailed along through his childhood beautifully, growing up here in this church with many of you. Being a good adoptee is a common coping mechanism among adopted people. Much like my sister and I were very good girls to avoid causing even more trouble at home, adopted people are often extra good to avoid being relinquished again. When Joey hit adolescence, the developmental period when people form their identity, he was being bullied daily at his school in Huntington Beach because he was Asian, if you can believe that. So when a few Asian kids called him over to hang out and offered him a hit from their vape pen, he was hooked. I can just imagine the fireworks that went off in his brain the first time he experienced his first hit of cannabis. He told me he knew immediately, well, after he recovered from the haze, that this was something that could ease his pain. We'll never know, but it is quite possible that Joey carries a genetic propensity to addiction that makes his addiction even stronger. And Joey has a poly addiction, which means he uses several substances, sometimes at once, and is not really picky about what he uses. Whatever is available, whatever someone's handing him, he will be happy to use that as long as it'll get him hazed, which is terrifying for the people who care about him. In February 2019, Joey was hospitalized after a suicide attempt, and we found out that he had been using substances for at least a year. Since then, we've tried many things to help him, but very little of it has worked at all. And we've tried just about everything that our medical system and society offers to addicted teens. 2 rehabs, a lockdown facility out of state, several psychiatrists, a PHP, partial hospitalization program, and an IOP, intensive outpatient program, many 12-step meetings, several psychologists and therapists, including many family sessions. Those were super fun. A wraparound team, teen support groups, several ER visits for overdoses or suicidal ideation, and 5 psych hospital stays. None of these have helped Joey deal with what we believe are the root causes of his addictions: developmental trauma from being relinquished by his birth parents, plus the pain of my divorce from his dad when he was 4, which reinforced his abandonment fears. By the way, adopted people have a significantly greater incidence of addiction, mental illness, and suicide. Joey has developed a very strong trauma response that probably began during his teenage birth mother's pregnancy. Even in utero, Joey's body and spirit internalized a strong primal sense of unwantedness, unworthiness, and he never developed that feeling of safety and security that infants are supposed to get when they're really young from their birth mother. So when he was separated from his birth mother at 2 weeks old, his little brain registered, "This world is unsafe and I am not wanted here." So it's no surprise that his drugs of choice are ones that numb out his existential pain, helping him escape from this terrifying life, his incredibly strong flight response. And the psychedelic substances he sometimes uses bring him to an alternate and often preferred reality. When I asked one of his rehab therapists if he could help Joey work on his developmental trauma, he told me that he knows how, but it wouldn't be fair to Joey because they would just get started digging in and then insurance will pull the plug on rehab after 2 or 3 months, and then he'd be left hanging there. I had another psychiatrist tell me that Joey's adoption can't possibly be a factor because he doesn't remember what happened when he was a baby. I think our healthcare system is completely broken. It's not helping our kids at all. The one person who's been really helpful to him is a man named Miguel Rosell. He's a practitioner of guided core integration. For the past 6 months or so, regularly, he's helped Joey recognize and deal with some of his primal feelings, his anger, and his deep, deep sadness. Joey's been more stable than ever in these last couple of months, and we believe it's because of this hard work that he's doing with Miguel as his guide. And now Joey would like to share a song that he wrote during one of his lowest periods in rehab about 2 years ago. You will hear his pain as well as some hope.
Looking down, staring at the street, never looking up at hope when I mope. When I take the time to think, I geek. Never losing sight that I might end it all tonight. In spite the love I feel tonight, shimmer my eyes of the fact I tried. No one understands my pain, feeling all alone inside. Might as well suicide, nothing feels alright. Feels alright. Doing all the drugs to numb out. Speaking in tongues do not out. Is it worth it? Is it worth it? Can I come out of this pain manifesting inside me? Someone come find me. Someone came and found me. Out of this ditch I found me. Family and friends stood by me. Now I see the light inside me. Thank God for the light, now I never feel the fright. Looking down, staring at the street, never looking up at hope when I mope. When I take the time to think, I geek. Never losing sight that I might end it all tonight. In spite the love I feel tonight, shimmer my eyes of the fact I tried. No one understands my pain, feeling all alone inside. Might as well suicide, nothing feels alright. Feels alright.
Here's some more wisdom from Gabor Mate. The greatest damage done by neglect, trauma, or emotional loss is not the immediate pain they inflict, but the long-term distortions they induce in the way a developing child will continue to interpret the world and her situation in it. All too often, these ill-conditioned implicit beliefs become self-fulfilling prophecies in our lives. It used to be that addiction was seen as a moral failure. Thankfully, that isn't explicitly espoused much anymore, but the roots of that judgmentalism in our society can be seen by the number of addicted people who are jailed for drug possession. Or do you remember the implication that George Floyd's murder was justified, sort of justified, because they found out he had an addiction to opioids? In the last few decades, our society has shifted to a disease model of addiction. It's not a lack of willpower, but people have a hereditary addiction gene that attributes to this chronic disease of addiction. And the medical system, instead of the penal system, should come to their aid. I know there's ample evidence that addiction is a malfunction in the brain, but after my experiences, I believe it's even more than that. After reading and listening to experts like Dr. Gabor Mate, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, and Paul Sunderland, I believe that when people experience trauma, especially in their formative years, that they are more susceptible to an addiction that helps them cope. Now, when I say trauma, I'm referring to any distressing event or series of events which overwhelms a person's ability to cope. So what's traumatic to one person may not be traumatic at all to someone else. Gabor Mate says trauma is not what happened to you, it's what your brain did to handle what happened to you. It can be something like a major accident or abuse. That's what we usually think of as trauma. Or it can be the neglect that I experienced as a child. Or maybe when you were really young, you had to go to the hospital and stay without your parents and you didn't know what was going on. Or maybe you lost someone that was close to you. Or maybe you went through a global pandemic. And when your trauma happens to you when you're very young, you might not even be aware of the trauma you hold in your body and spirit because you don't even have words or memories from your pre-verbal, pre-cognitive stage. So what are addicted people supposed to do with this trauma? Ideally, we can start to heal from our traumatic experiences and at the same time get support to develop new habits to replace the substance or behavior that is causing trouble. Healing from early trauma needs to occur not just in the cognitive brain, the frontal lobe, but in the primal brain, your brainstem and your cerebellum, and in the body. Some things I've personally tried and found helpful in healing trauma are meditation and mindfulness practices, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, or EMDR, brain spotting, holotropic breathwork, internal family systems model, or IFS, emotional freedom technique, or EFT, it's otherwise known as tapping, and sound baths. Some other techniques I've read about and might try someday are somatic experiencing, somatic hypnotherapy, somatic voice work, therapeutic drumming, trauma-informed therapy, and guided psychedelic therapy, especially with MDMA. The street drug is ecstasy for that psychedelic. Some forms of psychedelic therapy are very close to completing clinical trials and becoming a sanctioned form of therapy in the US, again. Out of all these modalities I've listed, exactly 0 of them are covered by our health insurance. I've had to dig to find these alternative practices. Facing my own trauma is not an easy task. It's become a lifelong process of coming out of the fog and reconnecting the part of me that knows just who I am, the whole of me. And now Marilyn Giss, Anna's mother, would like to talk about her journey with addiction from the point of view as a parent.
Well, I found that having a child succumb to a life of alcohol and drugs was both devastating and heartbreaking. The past 24 years has led me on a long journey filled with many emotions. First, disbelief and fear, anger, resentment, hurt, grief. About 20 years ago, though, I walked into the rooms of Al-Anon. And I know this doesn't work for everyone, but it did for me, and it still does today. After trying several different kinds of meetings, I found that participating in a parents' meeting was most helpful. Here's where I found I wasn't alone, that my story was that of many others. I found support and understanding. I saw hope by listening to others. And I learned to use tools that help me to grow and to cope during the tough times, as well as every day. I just want to read part of out of a daily reader from Al-Anon called One Day at a Time. But again, kind of describes and encompasses my feelings about Al-Anon. It really isn't so hard to believe in miracles in Al-Anon. We see such miracles, changes in people who come as newcomers, filled with self-pity and resentment and beset with fears. There may not even have been any improvement in their alcoholic situation at home, but what they learn in Al-Anon makes a tremendous difference in their own outlook. They gain confidence and poise, they come out of their shells, and they concern themselves with others in similar trouble. All of this can be attributed to the sound spiritual sense that Al-Anon makes, but certainly miracle is a good word to describe the results. So the first gift a newcomer receives from contact with Al-Anon is hope. I really never thought a day like this would come, where I'd be able to stand here with others who have shared their addiction, that we've had Beth, who's been able to put this service together and make people more aware of addiction, and that I'd be able to be here with my daughter sharing her story. So I'm so thankful for this day that we are together and that I can share this with Anna. What I've learned most over the past 20 years is that Anna has her journey for her continued recovery, and I have mine. I hope that we will be able to continue to share more times together, and I think we will. But I need to remember that we each need to stay in our own lane. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, for bringing us that perspective. And thank you for being such a great support over the last couple of years. I know you know what we've been going through. Before I close, I'd like to talk about how we as a community can support those who are addicted to substances or behaviors. Let's all work to destigmatize and decriminalize addiction. Without enabling people, let's provide compassion and understanding to those who are vulnerable enough to let you know that they have an addiction. We can nurture a safe community that prioritizes acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth, which is our third principle, by the way. If someone in our community lets you know that they have an addiction to something, let's do what we can to avoid triggering them. For instance, if your small group is getting together for a dinner and one of your members is an alcoholic, maybe you just don't bring out the wine. Let's provide ample opportunities for people to create meaning in their lives through service to a larger cause. And on a more systemic level, we need to continue to fight for social justice issues to lessen the trauma on everyone. Things like racism, poverty, the school to prison pipeline, toxic masculinity, misogyny, and violence toward LGBTQ people. And we need to support families with small children to make sure they are not fighting insurmountable obstacles that could create trauma for their child in their early development. Things like our failed border policy of family separation and children in cages is a recipe for disaster for those children. We need to do what we can to keep families together. And we need to continue to fight for a better healthcare system that provides adequate and effective trauma-informed care to all addicted people who want help. Now, if this service has left anyone raw or triggered because of your own experience with addiction, trauma, or loss, please look into getting help to process your painful feelings. If you don't know where to get help, Reverend Sean told me she's happy to guide you in the right direction. Or you can look for a therapist on Psychology Today's Find a Therapist website. Also, Joey, Amelia, Cindy, Anna, Marilyn, and I are all willing and available to continue the conversation with any of you anytime. May we all encourage each other on our journeys toward growth and wholeness, whether we have an addiction or have experienced trauma or not. We know that there are at least a few of us suffering with addictions in our midst. And there are probably many more, I'm going to guess. May we all remember that we are each made holy and loved right through. So now Zoomers, please sing along with our choir as they sing the song Sanctuary. Roomers, I invite you to stand in body or spirit, and we can sway.
Make us aware